this one, we're going to go over the micronutrients next. I have this broken down into about 4 parts. The first part, I should say, of this session will be the water-soluble vitamins, which is what we're going to cover today. Part 2 will be the fat-soluble vitamins, and then part 3 will be the major minerals, and part 4 will be the trace minerals. So before we actually get into the vitamins here, which we will in a few minutes, but I want to go into the background of how these vitamins work. First thing to note is that these vitamins, they differ in structure. So they're individual, not chained. So if you remember back to my macronutrients video, the macronutrients, carbs, fats, and proteins, they tend to chain together. So you have, the mono, poly, and di, saccharides for carbs, the fatty acids, so like triglycerides, phospholipids, for fats, and then amino acids for proteins. You have the peptides, right? They also don't yield any energy on their own. However, micronutrients, what they do is they help certain enzymes that, metabolize carbs, fats, and proteins, right? So the micronutrients help, push the enzymes along in getting the energy from said macronutrients that your body needs. Now, the next thing to note is micronutrients, and I had to add this part, I had forgot it at first, but micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals, they tend to be measured in micrograms because they come in such, micro amounts essentially. They're measured in either micrograms, and this is the symbol for micrograms, or milligrams, which, in parentheses is mg. So when you look on the back of certain foods and you look at like which food items and which drinks and whatnot provide you micronutrients, so certain vitamins like calcium and potassium and all of that, they tend to get measured in either micrograms or milligrams. Now, the water-soluble vitamins, they consist of your B and your C vitamins. And like I said, in a minute we'll go over all of those vitamins, but this is what they consist of, and these are some of the characteristics of said B and C vitamins. So your B and C vitamins, they're hydrophilic, meaning they mix well with water. Whereas, and I'm going to get to this in the second part of the video, but the fat-soluble vitamins, they're hydrophobic. So they don't mix well with water. Now, because B and C vitamins are hydrophilic, water ends up being the main source of transport when they enter your body. And also they travel freely in the body, with any excess being excreted in your urine, right, by, kidney monitoring and function. Now, the thing with water-soluble vitamins is, they can be destroyed, right? They can be very much, diminished and even destroyed. Meaning, if you're not careful about how you make certain foods, how you prepare it, because there's a few things that go into how you destroy a vitamin. Processing being one of them, right? Especially ultra processing, which is ironic because a lot of the vitamins, that we're about to go over, do come from certain foods that can be processed or that are processed. So like, certain meats, certain poultry, certain, fish, shellfish, seafood, right? The processing of certain items and certain, foods can destroy vitamins. Prolonged heating can destroy the thiamine vitamin. And then riboflavin is another example. Your riboflavin can be destroyed by UV rays and fluorescent lighting. And also, the B vitamins, they have what's called coenzymes. So, as you can pretty much imagine, see, enzymes, right? Our body has enzymes that help us with, doing certain things, right? Metabolizing amino acids, or, metabolizing energy from the carbs or from the fats that, we intake. Coenzymes help our, regular enzymes along in their processes. And so with that background, we're going to go ahead and get to the vitamins now. Now, I know this board has a lot written on it, but, try to bear with me. I'm going to go through each vitamin, and what I have up here is at the top row is basically the vitamins role, def disease, which basically is deficiency disease. So this video I wanted to talk about what happens when you're deficient in a certain vitamin, what your deficiency symptoms may look like. There can be a toxicity with certain vitamins. Basically meaning toxicity is what happens when you get too much of a vitamin, when your intake is in excess. And then there's the recommendations. Now the M and W basically equate to men and women, because oftentimes our intakes are different based on gender. Some vitamins, they're the same no matter what gender you are, but there are certain vitamins where, you know, if you're a man or a woman, right, the intake is going to differ. UL is the upper limit, right? And basically what that means is that's the maximum amount of a vitamin that you can take before you start having to worry about toxicity. Because if you go over the upper limit, you know, toxicity may occur depending on how often you're taking these vitamins in excess. And last but not least, on the last column, we got the sources. I want to go ahead and go over, I'm going to start with the B1 vitamin, and that's thiamine, okay? Now, the role of thiamine helps aid in energy metabolism, specifically your nerve and muscle activity, right? Now, deficiency disease for that is beriberi. The wet version of beriberi can equal edema. And if you remember from my proteins video, edema is essentially when plasma proteins leak in the space between your cells. And the dry version of beriberi is muscle wasting. So essentially, you know, your muscle starts wasting away. You know, you start looking at things like fatigue, you know, just loss of muscle and things like that. So that's what happens when you don't take in the recommended amount of thiamine. Now, deficiency symptoms, you know, heart failure is one deficiency symptom, muscle weakness, which I believe I mentioned already in the beriberi, the dry version. But there's also some neurological degeneration that may come with that as well. So you could be looking at fatigue, you know, a little bit of short-term memory loss, you know, so you can have poor short-term memory loss and even weight loss as a result. There's no toxicity right now for thiamine, so there, of course, since there's no toxicity, there's no upper limit. Because with toxicity and upper limits, you know, that relationship, it's a direct relationship. So if there's no toxicity established, then there's no UL established. Now, recommendations for men, 1.2 milligrams a day. And then for women, you're also looking at 1.1 milligrams a day. The sources that you can get thiamine from, you know, is pork, if of course, you know, your diet does allow, because I know, you know, I might have some vegans or vegetarians out there that don't eat that. But if you don't eat pork, then you could also be looking at whole grain and fortified enriched grain foods. Now, just in case you didn't know what fortified enriched grain foods are, those are essentially grains that have been enriched with nutrients. They essentially have, I believe it's bran and germ taken out of the you know, process. It essentially enriches the foods with nutrients. A good example is the I mentioned it before, I believe, but the Uncle Ben's original enriched parboiled rice, which is a rice that I tend to eat a lot of. It's enriched with, you know, niacin, thiamin, and I believe folate or folic acid, one of the two. Those are the type of things you want to look for. It normally will say so on the label on whatever item that you get, should you be looking for it. But, you know, some certain cereals, certain wheat breads, those are all fortified enriched grains too, just in case you needed some examples. Now we go to B2, which is riboflavin. Now they do the same thing as B1 as far as aiding in metabolism, right? They aid in energy metabolism, except the makeup obviously is different. You have flavin mononucleotide, or FMN for short. So you have flavin adenine dinucleotide, or FAD, right? And those basically are just, you know, of course, you know, without getting too scientific, they're basically compounds that make up riboflavin. It's the coenzyme version of riboflavin that helps aid in energy metabolism. Deficiency disease, you could be looking at a riboflavinosis, which essentially just equates to sores on the mouth, eyes, and lip fissures. Something else you may notice is a scaly rash on your genitalia. Yeah, I don't know if I really need to go any further into that one. For deficiency symptoms, you're looking at mouth cracks and redness, and you could also be looking at inflammation from skin lesions that are outfitted with greasy scales. Like a fish, essentially, like a fish's outer. There's no toxicity established, which of course means there's no upper limit established. So for men, 1.3 milligrams, women 1.1 milligrams per day. That's the recommendation for riboflavin. Some of the sources you can get riboflavin from is milk products, so like your yogurts and cheeses. Again, if that works for you, if you're into it. But if not, whole grain and fortified enriched grain foods provide that as well. Now we move on to B3, and vitamin B3 is what's known as niacin. Now niacin also, its role in your body is to aid in energy metabolism, just like the first two. It'll help protect against neurodegeneration. So niacin is what you're gonna want for, you know, your brain and nerve health. Deficiency disease is known as pellagra, which essentially consists of the big three. Triple D is what I like to, that's how I remembered it: diarrhea, dermatitis, and dementia. Now, for pellagra, you know, the origins of that word, pellis is skin and agra is rough. So essentially, pellagra leads to rough skin. Dermatitis being one of the big three, you know, anything derma has to do with skin. Some of the deficiency symptoms: DCV, which basically stands for diarrhea, constipation, and vomiting. You could also be looking at memory loss as a possibility. Of course, fatigue, right? Because neurodegeneration, if, you know, your brain and nerve cells are not maximized, you could be looking at, you know, neurological degeneration, right? So, you know, fatigue and maybe some memory loss, that's a part of your brain health. Possibly facing bilateral symmetrical rash on any areas that have been exposed to sunlight. For toxicity, and because of there being a toxicity for niacin, there's an upper limit established to make sure you don't reach toxic levels. So you're looking at a painful flush, nausea and vomiting can also occur. Liver damage, that's a possibility, and it's also been found that you can have impaired glucose tolerance. May lead you to hypoglycemia, not to be confused with hyperglycemia, right? Hypo means low blood sugar. Hyper is high blood sugar. So hypoglycemia, you know, essentially what can happen as a result of you not getting enough niacin, and, you know, your body sort of becomes, you know, intolerable to the carbs that you intake that, you know, is used for glucose conversions. The upper limit is 35 milligrams. As for the daily recommendations, men is recommended you get 16 milligrams per day, women 14 milligrams. Different types of sources, you know, niacin comes from, and pretty much for most of us, I would say we consume these mostly every day in some way, right? Meat, fish, poultry, even nuts, right? And that includes cashews, peanuts, even almonds have them. That's what that includes, right? And then of course, whole grains, fortified and rich grain foods. Biotin, it participates in gluconeogenesis when necessary, fatty acid synthesis, as well as amino acid breakdowns. You remember from my proteins video, everyone, based on our DNA, right, has an amino acid profile. And once that profile is put together, in order for, you know, other things in our body to work, essentially, amino acids get broken down, right? The chains of amino acids get broken down so that they can act as transport proteins, or, you know, what have you, help transport oxygen or transport blood if need be. Deficiency disease, to date, there isn't one, but there are symptoms. You could be looking at neurological disturbances, and they range anywhere from hallucinations to depression to tingling in your arm and legs. Everything I just essentially mentioned has to do with neurological, you know, processing, you know, your neurological system, nerves, brain cells, right? And of course, you could possibly be getting red and a scaly rash around your eyes, nose, and mouth. Now, there isn't a toxicity to date, which means there's no upper limit, and the recommendations for biotin is going to be for men and women, okay, both genders, 30 milligrams per day. They're widespread in all natural foods you can think of. I mean, anything natural you can think of, fruits, veggies, and it's also produced by the GI bacteria as well. So that's one of the reasons as to why biotin is not commonly, you know, deficient in most people, because, you know, biotin it just happens to be a vitamin that's also produced by our gastrointestinal tract bacteria. So, you know, that is something that essentially the body is able to synthesize on its own. So now for our pantothenic acid, we have that it synthesizes lipids, right, for our roles in the body. As you know, lipids is a term for fats, basically. That's our fatty acids. And it also helps with our neurotransmitters, steroid hormones, and for hemoglobin. It synthesizes all of these. Now, there is no deficiency disease, but there is a deficiency symptom. And that is, you know, we may face neurological disturbances such as insomnia, fatigue, irritability. You could also get hypoglycemia, which, you know, is basically low blood sugar, okay? Because pantothenic acid, you know, helps also synthesize some of the hormones that, you know, secrete insulin. So, You can also get numbness, cramps, right, and eventually could affect your ability to walk. There is no toxicity for it, but men and women are both recommended to get 5 milligrams per day. Now, there is no upper limit, given that there's no toxicity right now. It's not been found by, health professionals, organizations, or what have you. And you can essentially get it in different types of foods. So now our next vitamin is B6, right? And B6 basically consists of 3 P's. Those P's stand for pyridoxal, pyridoxine, and pyridoxamine. All 3 of them, they do kind of sort of chain together in a sense to create pyridoxal phosphate, okay, or PLP for short. So when you're looking at pyridoxal phosphate, those are used for amino acid conversions as well as metabolism, okay? So it metabolizes the amino acids. They also synthesize heme, nucleic acids, right, and lecithin. Now, if you remember from my fats video, lecithin is a type of essential fatty acid, all right? No deficiency disease, and there is a deficiency symptom though. There actually are a few. You're looking at scaly dermatitis, which, of course, scaly skin, right? You're looking at microcytic anemia, depression, confusion, and convulsions, all right? Now, the toxicity though, so there's a toxicity symptom, which of course means there's an upper limit established. Nerve damage leading to muscle weakness and eventually affecting your ability to walk. It could cause paralysis. And then you also are looking at possible skin lesions as well as convulsions, which was covered actually in the deficiency symptom. Now, men and women, both, the recommendation is the same, 1.3 milligrams. Now, that's for anyone that is between the ages of 19 and 50. The upper limit, though, that's been established is 100 milligrams a day. So 100 milligrams is plenty for B6. So once you reach that, okay, you're pretty much straight. But 1.3 milligrams, though, I mean, you're pretty much fine with that. Now, your sources come from meats, fish, poultry, and your potatoes, as well as any starchy veggies and non-citrus fruits. Folate is the next one. Now, folate is it's a pretty, they're all important, but folate, from what I've read, is definitely one of the more important B vitamins, because what it does is it converts B12, and in this sense, folate and B12, they sort of relate to each other in a sense. They sort of they're like a familial match, if you will. So folate converts B12 and it synthesizes DNA for rapid growing cells, as well as regenerates methionine. Methionine, if you remember from my proteins video, is an essential amino acid. It's one of the 9 essential amino acids. And essential amino acids, those are the ones that our body can't synthesize on their own. We have to get that from food. Now, there is no deficiency disease, but I did want to talk about something I've read about called spina bifida. And what spina bifida is, it's very common in infants. And what it is basically it's incomplete closing of the spine. Now, folate can help with that, all right? So, and a future video is going to come on this, but I wanted to talk about that to, kind of speak to my ladies out there who, may be watching and are looking at, maybe having kids, or maybe you're pregnant currently, and this video hits you at just the right moment. It's very important that, during your pregnancy, you get the vitamins that, are required. The excess or the, underconsumption, whatnot, that can pretty much make the difference in just how healthy, your fetus growing into a baby is, okay? For deficiency symptoms, macrocytic anemia, right? And then we have mental confusion, weakness, fatigue, and irritability, which of course are all neurological disorders or neurological degeneracies. Now, toxicity, okay, and as you can see, an upper limit's been established as a result, but toxicity, if you get folate in excess, it can impair your cells' divisions as well as protein synthesis. Okay, so it's going to affect your body's ability to, divide and replace cells. Okay, now anemia comes as a result because one of your cells that we all have is the red blood cell. Okay, and then when your red blood cells start to fail, or when your body doesn't, fails to synthesize and reproduce red blood cells, then you could be looking at anemia. Same thing with the GI tract, you know, the degeneration of the GI tract, or deterioration, if you will, same thing, of the GI tract. Now for men and women, the recommendation is the same, 400 micrograms per day. The upper limit is about 1,000 micrograms, so once you reach 1,000, you really don't have to go any further than that, okay? And the sources that come from that will be dark leafy greens, okay, dark green leafy vegetables. So like that'd be your spinach, that'd be, you know, kale, alright, any dark green leafy veggies. Maybe even romaine lettuce. Not so much the iceberg, that's a little lighter. But romaine lettuce should give you that too. Legumes, so that's going to be your beans, right? Black beans, edamame, pinto beans, lentils, and any colored lentils. That'd be black lentils, green lentils, red lentils. And it can also come from fruits as well as your whole grains. Okay, those are all the sources of folate. So it's not going to be hard for you to get folate either. Alright, and we are almost finished. So we are now at B12. Now, as I mentioned before, B12 has a sort of familial match, if you will, to folate. Like they're familiar in the way that they, you know, operate, in the way that they function, and the roles that they play in your body. So with B12, B12 protects your nerve fibers, and it supports healthy cell replication, specifically, you know, more so for your bones. So if you underconsume B12, you could be looking at anemia as well, pernicious anemia. And what pernicious anemia is that's lack of intrinsic factor. If you have a lack of intrinsic factor, I would look into, you know, maybe your genetics. Intrinsic factor is what's required for absorption of said vitamins and nutrients that in the foods that we eat. So if you're not absorbing the, you know, nutrients and the vitamins and the minerals that you need, then you can end up with pernicious anemia from B12. With B12, it's not so much that we're deficient, you know, because B12 pretty much exists in just about everything we eat. I'll just go ahead over to the sources. As you can see, meat, fish, poultry, shellfish, milk, you know, so cheese and eggs, right? Dairy products, basically. B12 exists in just about anything that you can eat. So most people aren't deficient in B12. Instead, what health professionals have found is that people may have an issue with absorbing B12 once it enters their body. That may be why, you know, you can be deficient in B12. And again, I would look at maybe your genetics, your amino acid profiles, maybe. Once you have a profile put together, then it determines how well your body, you know, does the things it's supposed to, carrying and transporting oxygen to and from cells, you know, cell multiplication and growth and things like that. Also, it says here large and immature red blood cells. As far as deficiency symptoms, so we've already mentioned anemia. Now, peripheral nerve degeneration. So basically, you know, your peripheral nerves, they can start to degenerate. You could be looking at possible paralysis, right? Because eventually, you know, that degeneration is going to affect your ability to walk, and, you know, it'll affect, like, you know, you'll start getting, you know, certain neurological dysfunctions, you know, maybe in your arms, legs, like tingling, right? You know, fatigue, weakness. Something else is constipation and then appetite loss. Now, there's no toxicity, which means there's no upper limit established. So for the recommendation though, both men and women, okay, 2.4 micrograms per day. Choline is used to make acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter in our bodies. Lecithin is a phospholipid. It's a type of phospholipid, which is one of our essential fatty acids in our bodies. It can also help with, choline also helps with neurological development in our fetuses, right? So again, for my ladies out there, right, you know, for neurological development, want to make sure you get choline in, you know. It's found to also improve cognition in adults. There is no deficiency disease, but there is a possible deficiency symptom. This one is still being tossed around in the air, still being studied and researched, right? There's nothing really peer-reviewed yet on it, but it's possible liver damage could occur from lack of choline. Toxicity, you could get possible liver damage as well. You could also experience fishy body odor, as well as hypotension, abnormally low blood pressure, whereas hypertension is high blood pressure. About 550 milligrams for men per day and 425 milligrams for women per day. And because there's a toxicity, an upper limit has been established of 3,500 milligrams. The sources you can get choline from is milk, liver, eggs, and peanuts. So basically, you know, your dairy products. If you eat liver, more power to you. I don't really see myself ever eating it. You know, for me, it is a source. But if you don't eat liver, milk, eggs, and peanuts will still do the trick for you. And our last vitamin is one that we most likely all know, right? We was told as kids that this was the vitamin we needed in order to help ourselves, you know, get better whenever we, you know, face an illness, whenever we get like the common cold, you know, we get sick. This is the vitamin that we were told we absolutely needed. And it is one that we absolutely need. But, you know, as far as the common colds and things like that, that may be the vitamin to shorten the duration of a common cold, but there's little to no evidence showing that vitamin C can prevent a common cold. And with that, the role in our body, you know, as I mentioned, immune health, and it also serves as an antioxidant, which is basically it helps fight against free radicals in our bodies, right? Free radicals are pretty much unstable molecules in our bodies that, you know, attack our immune systems, which leave us open to sicknesses, illnesses, disease, viruses, and all things like that. It also helps form collagen, which from my proteins video, I believe that was the video I mentioned collagen. Collagen is connective tissue for bones and teeth. It also transports fatty acids across the mitochondria membrane. If you are deficient, okay, you could be looking at scurvy. And scurvy basically consists of just about all of these things, right? You could be looking at hemorrhaging, all right? And the reason you could be looking at hemorrhaging essentially is because back here where I mentioned, you know, vitamin C helps form collagen, you know, the connective tissue for, especially for bones and teeth. You know, whenever you get a cut or anything like that, or you know, you're dealing with like blood loss, you know, you could hemorrhage from a lack of vitamin C, from a deficiency, because you know you don't have the connective tissue to help scar yourself, right? To, you know, for scar tissue and whatnot. You know, if you get a cut, if you're, you know, lacking in vitamin C, that's what you could be facing. You can also be looking at rough, brown, and scaly skin, right? So somewhat in the arena of dermatitis. Now, for deficiency symptoms, you could be looking at joint pain, poor wound healing. Again, it ties back into the hemorrhaging and the scar tissue being compromised, collagen, that all ties in together. You could be looking at inflamed or bleeding gums. And then I also put in parentheses here, I wanted to talk about smokers. So for all my smokers out there, you know, this one is definitely for you. Now, of course, you'll do whatever it is that you want to. I'm only giving you this information so that you have it, so that you can be able to make informed decisions. So I'm not going to tell you to stop smoking. I would recommend it though. And the reason why, I'm going to go into it now. So with smokers, right? What happens with cigarette smoke, I don't know how many of you actually knew this, but as it relates to vitamin C, cigarette smoke has a tendency to remove the antioxidative properties from vitamin C. And as a result, when you smoke cigarettes, it leaves your body pretty much free to attack from the free radicals that may exist in it. It's recommended that smokers, their recommendations is going to go up by about, I believe it was 35%. So, you know, and that also includes those that are, you know, that face secondhand smoke too. So even if you're not a smoker, but you know, you face secondhand smoke, maybe some of your friends or family, they smoke around you, and you know, you start getting whiffs of it, that affects you as well. It still does the same thing as if you were smoking a cigarette. So you do want to be mindful. Okay, make sure you are getting your vitamin C if you do smoke, if you're around people who smoke, right? If you get a lot of secondhand smoke, definitely make sure you there's no shortage of vitamin C for you. Nausea, abdominal cramps, and diarrhea, that's what can come from toxicity. And because there's a toxicity involved, there's an upper limit that goes with that. That upper limit being 2,000 milligrams for adults only. But our daily recommendations for men, 90 milligrams, and for women, about 75 milligrams. Sources of vitamin C, you might drink like orange juice in the morning, or even apple juice, cranberry juice, right? And those juices have to be made from 100% juice and not so much concentrate. There's also citrus fruits, okay? So for me, you know, I like to eat pineapples. You know, I also like to eat strawberries, you know, stuff like that. Potatoes also give you vitamin C, right? They're also high in vitamin C, you know, content. So are certain vegetables. Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, and spinach. So, you know, your dark leafy green vegetables as well as even your lighter ones. That pretty much concludes this video. Now I'm going to go on a short recap here. I'm not going to, you know, talk about a whole lot. You know, basically everything here it speaks for itself. But basically the main thing I want to say in this recap is that there's often a misconception that to get the vitamins and the minerals that you need, you got to take like, you know, supplements. Okay, you know, multivitamins or maybe even certain shakes, powders, protein powders or what have you. Big misconception. There are plenty of foods that provide the vitamins that you need. If you already eat meats, right, different types of meats, poultry, pork, you know, seafood, veal, lamb, and of course your green vegetables, broccoli, you know, your dark leafy greens, even the light leafy greens, fruits. If you eat that stuff, you're most likely already getting majority of the vitamins here that are on this board. Okay, so you don't have to go taking a multivitamin unless you absolutely do have trouble with getting the vitamins that you need. But you can get it from food. And of course, it's also important to remember, you know, as I'm doing this recap, it's important to remember that some of these vitamins, while they don't have a toxicity, there's still no reason for you to go overboard with them. Okay, once you get your recommended amount, you're pretty much fine. Again, also I mentioned briefly, you know, earlier, a video in the future is coming about, you know, that's going to be tailored and targeted to my women out there, and especially the women who, you know, are looking to have kids or, you know, maybe are already pregnant. If you've already had kids, I mean, maybe this will still be good for you. This will still be good info, maybe that you didn't have before as you were going through your pregnancy. But, you know, there are certain vitamins as well as minerals that will affect your fetus's development, okay? So when you're pregnant, obviously you're not just eating for you, right? You're not just getting the proper nutrients and, you know, vitamins and minerals for you. You're gonna be doing this for two, okay? Because the fetus development, that very much depends on what it is you're putting into your system. You know, I'm well aware that a lot of women tend to have cravings, right? So you crave certain things, but you want to make sure that those cravings don't come at the detriment of the vitamins that you should be getting in order to maximize the development of that fetus as much as possible. You want to make sure there's no detriment there. But either way, you know, these are all the B vitamins as well as the C. That's pretty much going to conclude this video. So I hope that I gave you, you know, info that was of value to you. If I did, give me a like, you know, even give me a subscribe if you feel inclined. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, hit my comment section. I do check them periodically. This has been session 103A, which is the water-soluble vitamins. Look out for the next video, which is going to be 103B. That'll be the fat-soluble vitamins, which, if you don't know, are vitamins A, D, E, and K. Some of these things even I didn't know, you know, and I've been in the fitness and nutrition realm for many years now, so, you know, it's always good, you know, if there's anything that, you know, with everything that I do know, you know, I'm always up for learning new things, so my hope is that we can learn something together. So, you know, either way, look out for the next video. I thank you all for tuning in, and I will see y'all on the next one. Take care.